Welcome back once again to the Imaginary Gallery. It's TJ, your host. We are still covering portions from Lundy Bancroft's Why Does He Do That? Inside the Minds of Angry and Controlling Men. In the last video, which was the first video in this little tiny series, we covered a story that Mr. Bancroft told us involving a man who destroyed a neighbor's maple tree, and there were a list of 9 responsibilities this abusive person needed to complete. We're now joining on to that with the section of how these steps apply to abuse. If you didn't see that, go back one so you'll be caught up. Bancroft tells us that the box below summarizes how the steps in the tree story apply to an abusive man's process of change. Number 1, fully admit to his history of psychological, sexual, and physical abusiveness towards any current or past partners whom he or she has abused. Denial and minimizing need to stop, including discrediting your memory of what happened. He can't change if he's continuing to cover up to others or to himself important parts of what he has done. Now that's the cluster B thing, because if you're dealing with one of them, you won't get the person to do these things. These steps will not be followed. Instead, you'll be given deflection. You'll be blamed. You'll have things you did brought in that have nothing to do with anything. So this book is hopeful that there are people out there who are not cluster B, who are capable of changing for the better. Number 2, acknowledge that the abuse was wrong, unconditionally. He needs to identify the justifications he has tended to use repeatedly, including all the ways that he may have blamed you, and to talk in detail about why his behaviors were unacceptable without slipping back into defending them. Number 3, acknowledge that his behavior was a choice, not a loss of control. For example, he needs to recognize that there's a moment during each incident at which he gives himself permission to become abusive, and that he chooses how far to let himself go, which is something I mentioned in a Narcissist Bag of Tricks recently. Lundy Bancroft copied. Number 4, recognize the effects his abuse has had on you and on your kids, and show empathy for those. He needs to speak in detail about the short and long-term impact that his or her abuse has had, including fear, loss of trust, anger, loss of freedom, and other rights. He needs to do this without reverting to feeling sorry for himself or talking about how difficult this experience has been for him. Number 5, identify in detail his pattern of controlling behaviors and entitled attitudes. He needs to speak in detail about the day-to-day tactics of abuse he uses. Equally important, though, he must be able to identify his underlying beliefs and values that have driven such nasty behaviors, such as considering himself entitled to constant attention, looking down upon you as inferior, or believing that men aren't responsible for their actions if they've been provoked by the partner. Number 6, develop respectful behaviors and attitudes to replace the abusive ones that he is stopping. You can look for examples such as improving how well he listens to you during conflicts and at other times, carrying his weight of household responsibilities and child care, and supporting your independence. He has to demonstrate that he's come to accept the fact that you have rights and they are equal to his. Number 7, reevaluate his distorted image of you, replacing it with a more positive and empathic view. He's got to realize that he has had mental habits of focusing on and exaggerating his own grievances against you and his perceptions of your weaknesses, and to begin instead to compliment you and pay attention to your strengths and your abilities. Number 8, make amends for the damage he's done. He's got to develop a sense that he's got a debt to you and to your kids as a result of his evil behavior. He can start to make up somewhat for his actions by being consistently kind and supportive. putting his own needs on the back burner for a few years, talking with people whom he's misled in regard to the abuse, and admitting to them that he was lying. Good luck with the cluster B. Paying for objects that it's damaged, and many other steps relating to cleaning up the emotional and literal messes that its behavior has caused. It also needs to accept that it may never be able to fully compensate you. Number 9. Accept the consequences of its actions. It should stop whining about or blaming you for problems that are the result of his abuse, such as your loss of desire to be intimate with him, the children's tendency to prefer you over him, or the fact that he's simply on probation. Number 10. Commit to not repeating his abusive behaviors and honor that commitment. He shouldn't place any conditions on this improvement, such as saying,
"I won't call you any names as long as you don't ever raise your voice."
If he does backslide, he cannot justify his abusive behaviors by saying, "But I've done so good for 3 months. You can't expect me to be perfect." As if a good period earned him chips to spend on some occasional abuse. Number 11. Accept the need to give up his privileges and do so. This means saying bye-bye to double standards, to flirting with other ladies, to taking off with his friends all weekend while you look after the poor kids, and to being allowed to express anger, but you're not. Number 12. Accept that overcoming abusiveness is likely to be a lifelong process. He at no time can claim that his work is done by saying,
"I've changed, but you haven't,"
or complain that he's sick of hearing about his abuse and control, and that it's time to get past all that. He needs to come to terms with the fact that he will probably need to be working on his issues for good, and that you may feel the effects of what he's done for many years to come. Number 13, and the last one, be willing to be accountable for his actions, both the past actions and the future actions. His attitude that he's above reproach has to be replaced by a willingness to accept feedback and criticism, to be honest about any backsliding, and to be answerable for what he does and how it affects you and your kids. Bancroft then tells us that abusive men do not make lasting changes if they skip any of the above steps, and some are easier than others. Most of Bancroft's clients find it pretty easy to apologize. For example, in fact, an abusive person may weave apologies into its pattern of abuse, so that when it says, "I'm sorry," it becomes just one more weapon in this creature's hand. Its unspoken rule may be that once it's apologized, no matter how cursorily or devoid of sincerity, his partner must be satisfied. She is not to make any further effort to show her feelings about his mistreatment, nor may she demand that he fix anything. If she tries to say anything more about the incident, he jumps back into the abuse mode, yelling things like,
"I told you I was sorry. Now shut that mouth."
But even a genuine and sincere apology is only a starting point. Most of Bancroft's clients make it through the first 3 steps. They'll admit to a large portion of their abuse. They'll agree that the actions resulted from choice rather than a loss of control. And they apologize. They dig in their heels at that point. An abusive person's sense of entitlement is like a rude, arrogant voice screaming inside of its head. It yells, "You've given up too much already. Don't you budge 1 more inch." They already talked you into saying your abuse is all your fault when you know it's at least half to blame for them because of this crap that she does. She should be grateful to you for apologizing. That wasn't easy to do. She's lucky you've gone this far. A lot of guys would rather tell her to go screw you know what. And the voice drags him back into the mud that he had finally taken a couple of baby steps out of. Step number 4, for example, demands that the abusive person accept the partner's right to be angry. He actually has to take seriously the furious things that she says and think them through, rather than using her emotional pitch as an excuse to stuff her opinions right back down her throat, as he's done usually. When Bancroft explains this step, his clients first look at him as though he had an eye in the middle of his forehead. They all see an eye. They say, "I should do what? When she's yelling at me, I'm supposed to just sit there and take it?" To which Bancroft replies, "More than that. Actually, you should reflect on the point she's making and respond to them in a thoughtful way. And then he begins practicing exactly that in the group. He'll ask them for examples of their partner's angry statements and then guide them through understanding why the partners are furious and accepting their right to feel that way. These steps go on. Step number 6 and 7 require that he make up for what he's done, that he actually has incurred a debt because of the abuse. Step 8 says he has to change his behavior for the future, not just say he's sorry for the past, and he's got to stop his abusiveness completely and for good. In other words, he's truly going to have to deal with the attitudes that are driving his bullying and disrespect of the partner. Step 11 requires him to give up the privileges that the abusiveness has won him. As we go through each of these steps, some clients choose to struggle through as hard as the process is, while others throw in the towel and resume their abusive behaviors.
Oh yes, I am the narcopath. I'm here to give you just a few more confessions. Hopefully they'll make your life run a little bit smoother.
If you remember, we dated during high school, and you were just a little bit brighter than the usual. You quickly figured me out. You learned pretty much every single one of my secrets. I had to do damage control, because if anybody figures out my secret, I'm done for. So I almost always come up with something, some kind of excuse to dump the person, because the truth is I know I'm about to be dumped, and I can't have that. So I'm going to do the dumping. Important lesson to learn. So I went through with the dumping and hopefully humiliated you, because I know you had strong feelings for some parts of me. I just could tell. You're one of those with feelings.
Bear in mind, I'm telling you all this under duress. I'm being forced to, basically. The information's true.
I know you probably sit there and wonder sometimes about some of the talks you tried to have with me, in case you haven't figured it out by now. I don't do good with talk. What you were doing when you were talking to me, going over case-by-case examples of situations where I betrayed you, lied to you, and deliberately deceived you. The truth is, I don't want to hear that stuff. I know when we first met, I mirrored your values and told you,
What? Your ex-lover cheated on you? If I was your lover, I would never cheat.
I said stuff like that, and then, eventually, behind your back, did exactly that.
The fact is, you were unique. At least in my experience, I never met anybody else anything like you.
Which justifies, yes, you are unique. The problem is, I ain't unique. I tried to follow along with you and the stuff you'd say and do to try to make it look like I was just as unique as you, but clearly I wasn't. So I had to take alternative measures.
So what I did was, when I saw you doing your unique behaviors, at first I told you, oh, I think it's great that you're unique. I don't like everybody to be the same.
But then, when I got to know you a little bit more and got to see your uniqueness and the way you strum on that guitar for hours on end, at that point,
I switched my game and I said, I don't want to be around you. All you do is play that ridiculous guitar over and over. And
that left you dumbfounded, because you recalled when I told you I thought it was great that you were unique. And yet here I was, saying the opposite. Well, honey, welcome to the land of the narcopath. None of that stuff means anything to us. We just say it to get you in the sack. Like I got you. If I never would have mirrored you, never would have pretended to think you were so unique, I probably never would have made it. There you go. That's why I did it.
I know when we made love together and got intimate,
I used to tell you as you were doing your thing down there, honey, that's reserved for you and for you only. Little did you know the whole football team was servicing it on your nights off. I know it made you feel special. That's why I said it. The truth was, my private parts have been shaved raw, ripped up from football field to bowling ball to everything. But I couldn't tell you that and expect to get a date with you. Well, now you know. Whew.